Everyone's already been going on about what a surprise success Scene Zero is, about how much they love Mabayu because she's a fail girl just like me, for real. But let's put all that story stuff aside for a second. Let's talk about her in-game play. So she has just released as a character. She's a light type, a buffer, and she is quite specialized and quite unique and a bit different than a lot of other characters, which is a good sign because it shows that the developers, they have a lot of stuff they can still do with this gameplay system, even though, you know, we just started and they're showing us here's all the cool stuff we can do. But you need to actually make sure you understand exactly how she works and when you want to use her and when you want to maybe not use her, how to use her on the battle, all of that kind of stuff, how her auto battle AI works, everything. So as I mentioned, she's a light type buffer. There's currently no other light type buffer that is 5-star, but there is a really good 4-star light type buffer, which is Hazuki. And as it turns out, she's kind of like the Hazuki 5-star replacement if you have her. So here's what she does. Let's just go down the skills very quickly just to get a basic understanding. I'm going to start with this battle skill because it's the most important part and like the central core part of her kit. It's called Cut and Splice. And what it does is it gives someone first off a 50% attack buff for 2 turns. 50% is a lot. That is a crazy amount. So that is great and all, but what is Cutaway? Well, Cutaway does the following. Increases action order by 100% and removes 2 debuffs at the turn's end for the character with the Cutaway. And you can't give it to yourself. So you can't give it to Mabayu. And when it activates, it's removed. To put that in different terms, let's say you give it to someone like your Homura, for example, then your Homura takes her turn, and then her turn is done. And then when her turn is done and it's over, and it was supposed to go to the next character's turn, it doesn't. Instead, the ability activates, and then it gives Homura another turn. Awesome. So you're basically getting another turn. Awesome. So you basically give someone a double turn with that, and also removes 2 debuffs as well in the middle of that, which currently is not that important because there's not that many enemies that do like really important debuffs that you need to get rid of. And keep in mind, it only gets rid of the debuffs at the end of your first turn. So then only on your second turn that you take with that character do you actually have like no debuffs on you. So that's kind of weird. But the important part is also that it says right here, on effect activation, Cutaway is removed. Why does it say that? Because if, for example, you were wondering, oh, what if I take her Ascension and gave her 1 turn duration to the buff effect? It is a buff effect, and it will last an additional turn. Does that mean I get 2 uses? No, because as soon as it activates, it gets immediately removed, so having more turns on it doesn't do anything. So already we can kind of see, oh, this is kind of similar to what Hazuki does, where Hazuki gives someone a 100% action advance. And by doing so, you can basically give people additional turns in a way. But it had a few caveats, because of course, the way that 100% action advance works is that it takes all of the character's remaining wait time and basically puts it to 0. But if a character already has a low wait time because most of their turn has already come almost, then giving them 100% action advance doesn't really do anything that much. So most of the time you want to make sure that you give an action advance to someone who has just taken their turn and is really far down the list, so that you can put them really far up the list again, so they jump a lot of places. That's where you want to use your action advance. But, well, it can be quite hard to use. In the case of this, with Cut and Splice, that's not really that big of a deal, because, well, you can just give it to someone, and then it doesn't matter when their turn comes. At some point their turn arrives, and whenever the turn arrives, then they just get 2 turns. Meaning you don't have to worry about how close their turn is, how far away their turn is. None of that matters. You can just give it to someone who you want to give a bonus turn to, and they will just get a bonus turn. That's it. And that's really good quality of life over someone like Hazuki, and is, in my opinion, already good enough to be someone who does a similar or same job than Hazuki, but better. Not the exact same job, right? But it's a very similar job than Hazuki, but better. Also, the attack buff is better than what Hazuki does. Awesome. So then we have a regular basic attack. Awesome. And then let's go to the ability. So, like almost all buffers, at battle start gives yourself action order 30%, or healers as well do that. So you just get your first turn quicker, which is important. So then you can immediately, as soon as the battle starts, immediately give someone cutout. Similar to how Hazuki immediately as the battle starts wants to immediately give her turn to someone. So that's why she also has that. And then it also says on basic attack, advances on action order by 20%. So I can already tell you right now, with battle skill, since you want to use this every single turn, because unlike Hazuki, like I said, you don't need to worry about action order. That means you can always, every single time it's Mabayu's turn, you can always just use this on someone. But because of that, that means you're going to use your SP every turn. And because you give someone a double turn, that means they take twice as many SP. So Not only does Mabayu use her skill every turn, another character is using their skill twice per turn, so that's already 3 SP that you're gonna have to use for this entire combo. That's a lot of skill points you're gonna be using. So maybe at some point you run out of SP and you need to have Mabayu use her normal attack. This is why this is here. So if you are low on SP, the game kind of throws you a bone and says, okay, don't worry, we got you. 20% action all advance so that at least your next turn comes around faster, so that you can then use your SP that you just generated faster than you would otherwise. Awesome. And the more important part is she has a passive aura where she increases the damage dealt when targeting elemental weakness by 20%. So I think the way this works internally is just basically a 20% damage up buff, like other characters with damage up buffs, but like a conditional, like it only applies when you're targeting the element weakness of your enemy. Okay, awesome. So in most cases, you're going to be using this against enemies that of course have weakness to your attacker, and then you can just read this as increases damage by 20% for everyone who is of that element. Awesome, cool. So I quickly mention the support skill because it's not actually that important. On basic attack and versus action order by 10%, which is good. It's basically just the same thing as the regular passive, but smaller, and increases speed by 20%. Almost every buffer has something like that, where the support Kyoku ability increases speed by a little bit. 20% is about in the middle of that. I think the best is still, I don't know, I think it's like 30% or something, but yeah. It's about average. It's a pretty average support ability and applies to buffer. Awesome. Now the only thing we haven't talked about yet is the special attack, and the special attack is just a very standard special attack for a buffer where it just gives some damage buffs. So it's a single target attack, which is called Hollow Woman, by the way, which is a reference to the movie Hollow Man, because almost everything that Mabayu says is a movie reference because she's a movie geek. And it also then buffs everyone with 25% damage up, and then an additional 20% if you're targeting elemental weakness. So let's say you are definitely fighting someone who you have elemental weakness against, like the enemy is dark weak and you have a Homoda on the team, you might as well read this as a 45% damage up for that Homoda on top of the 20% damage up from this. It's a 65% damage up for that Homoda. That's really good. So, but yeah, aside from just giving everyone a damage buff, doesn't really do anything, this special right here. And by the way, you can see that the 20% elemental weakness doesn't actually increase with level. It's only the overall damage buff that increases with level. And generally, I've gone through her abilities and noticed that she doesn't actually scale that much with level. Like, she only gets a little bit more of all of her percentages. Like, not even her ability. Most of her ability doesn't even scale with levels. So it's actually not that important to immediately rush her to max level on magic level, because she doesn't actually scale that well. And because she almost never attacks aside from her special attack and maybe sometimes her basic attack, her actual stats also don't matter that much. So she's someone who's actually very easy to build because you don't really need to build that much on her at all, and her magic level doesn't have to be super duper high either. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, so now that we've gone over the general build, something that I'm not going to forget this time, which I forgot last time, is to go over the ascensions for the character, which is the regular A1 and the regular A4 that every buffer has, so nothing special here. So the only one that's different is of course the A2. And by the way, this doesn't mean that for now and every time in the future a unit releases, every single future unit is going to have exactly the same A1 and A4 as every single other character in the same role. Why? Because Lux Madoka actually has her own A1, A2, and A4 that no one else shares. So it very much is possible to have very specific A1s and A4s. It's just currently they're not doing that, but in the future they might. Anyway, so then we have a different A2, which is increases damage level targeting elemental weakness by another 30% for all allies with Cutaway. So Cutaway is of course the skill. So when you give a skill to someone, not only does that character get a double turn and 50% attack, now they also get a 30% damage up against weak element, which should almost always be actually triggering, because you do want to specifically use Mabayu with all of we've seen so far against targets that are elemental weak to you. And then also gives you a 10% action order advance for all allies on when Mabayu uses the battle skill, which, to compare that, you know that Mami has a 20% action advance whenever she reaches 5 magic, and Muamura has a 20% action advance whenever she uses her skill, and with A2 and Mabayu, then she also has a 10% action advance when she uses her skill. So it's like half of Muamura's skill you get with having A2. Awesome. But generally a pretty decent A2, but at the same time it's nothing earth-shattering, but it will make you deal a lot more damage specifically against elemental weak targets. Okay, so currently we have seen a lot of stuff. We have made a lot of mentions. Let's formulate all of that together before I go to the second part where I talk about more specific aspects of how to use her in battle. But we can already tell, okay? First off, you need a lot of SP. You need a really high amount of SP to actually make sure you can both have Mabayu use her skill every turn and then also actually be able to have the character that you give cutout to actually have 2 skills. Because that's a lot of SP that takes, and that means that everyone else in the team will have to be using normal attacks. So if you, for example, in the boss has been broken, you're in break, and now Mabayu is needs 1 SP to give cutaway to the attacker, and then the attacker needs to use 2 skill points to use both of those skills. That's already 3 SP. So you have 3 other characters in the team outside of Mabayu and the attacker. Those 3 other characters all need to use their normal attack. Like if you have another buffer or debuffer, you need to use normal attack. Tank needs to use normal attack. Sustain needs to use normal attack. Everyone, your breaker needs to use normal attack, because otherwise you won't have the SP to actually be able to do this. Like, it's really difficult to make sure that you can actually manage all your SP. There is a way of getting around that. So you remember how Hazuki actually didn't quite have the same problem, because she has an A2, and her A2 gives her an SP point whenever she uses her special, which is very easy to get because she's a low rarity character and it's only A2. Most people will have this. But on Mabayu, you need to actually get all the way to A4 to get the same effect on special attack grants 1 SP. And then it's actually a lot easier to make use of her without immediately running out of SP all the time. And by the way, Mabayu also has really high numbers of bonuses for like her attack buff and her damage buffs, that the 50% increased buff effects from this is also extremely powerful. So A4 on Mabayu is extremely good, but that's a lot of investment that probably is not worth it right now unless you're specifically a whale, okay? But at least once you reach A4 at some point in the future, maybe, because she's a standard character, you're going to be rolling her on standard at the end of July, maybe. I think you might be able to get her in the standard pool. And yeah, if you ever get her to A4, this will help you a lot with the SP management. Okay, so that's the first downside, and the first thing you need to worry about is the SP management. Secondly, there's so many bonuses she gives damage-wise that are only against the weak element. That means you're going to be pairing her with an attacker, and that attacker needs to actually be of the correct element. So you might be wondering yourself, who is the best partner for Mabayu? Of course it's Homura. Like, okay, Homura is absolutely the best partner for Mabayu. Okay, outside of story, if we're ignoring story, okay, we're talking about the gameplay. In gameplay, it's like whatever the boss is currently weak to. Let's say you're fighting a boss and the boss is weak to, for example, fire. Well, you're going to put, for example, your Momoko or your Kyoko in there, and that's going to be the best partner for Mabayu. Or let's say, for example, the boss is light weak. Well, you have your Oriko, you have your Madokami. You're going to partner that with your Mabayu, etc. For every single element out there, you need to make sure specifically to use an attacker that is good against the enemy. Now, I don't care if you're saying, for example, oh, I have an A4-5 Homura, so if the enemy is weak to Aqua, for example, but not Dark, I'm still going to use Homura, right? Haha, because Homura is just so good. No. If I see an enemy that's weak to Aqua and not to Dark, I'm not using Homura. I'm going to use Yachio. Because not only are elemental bonuses extremely powerful and extremely important, so even if I didn't have Mabayu, I would be using Yachio instead on an Aqua weak enemy. But on top of that, the damage bonuses from hitting weak element with Mabayu are so incredibly powerful that if you combine all of them, you're doing way more damage than someone who is off the wrong element would ever do. Like, keep in mind that if you're off the wrong element in battle mode or in nightmare mode or in chaos mode or in tower or in score attack, everything that isn't like regular main story, like normal difficulty, bosses have resistance to elements they're not weak to. So in that scenario with the Aqua weak enemy that isn't weak to Dark, that enemy would be taking, I think, 30% less damage from weak element while taking 20% bonus damage from the element that it is weak to. And if you do the math, the difference between the two is about 71%. Like, the character that is of the correct element deals about 71% more damage than the character who isn't of the correct element. So that's really important. And then on top of that 71%, you then get all of the damage bonuses from Mabayu, hitting weak element, doing a lot of damage from all of this. So you're absolutely going to want to have always the correct type. In fact, the difference might be so strong that even if you didn't have Yachio, and let's say we have the same scenario, Aqua weak, not Dark weak, same scenario, then even then you might say, hey, I guess we're gonna use a 4-star like Asuka or whatever, because the difference is just that large, specifically with Mabayu on top of that. Keep all of that in mind. So you need to make sure Mabayu has the correct SP for all of them, and you need to make sure that you're using an attacker that the boss is actually weak to. And yeah, let's say, for example, you're not actually using an attacker, you're using, for example, Ren as a DPS, and of course the enemy needs to be void, weak. Of course, like your DPS generally, not just your attacker, but specifically your DPS needs to be of the correct element. Okay, that's what you need to keep in mind when you're playing Mabayu, which then also leads into the caveat that if you're playing her in PvP, she's probably one of the best characters because the double turn is just really important in PvP, but damage-wise, she kind of doesn't actually give that many good damage buffs in PvP because she doesn't activate the weak element part of her kit, because in PvP, the characters aren't weak to any element, so you can't activate this part of the kit, sadly. Okay, now let's actually talk about the second part of this video, where I'm going to talk about how she actually works in battle. So I'm going to put some stuff on screen where I fight against the current last boss of Nightmare mode, which is the Ferris Wheel of Chelation Land, Big Ferris Wheel, weird name. And the idea is, first off, when the fight starts, of course the boss is not currently in break, so putting cutaway on your attacker isn't going to do anything. So instead you put cutaway on your breaker, and this is going to be your first idea going into a battle. Put cutaway on breaker to make the boss get broken really fast. And you can see that by giving my Madoka, who is at least A2 and has a support Kyoku that gives her increased break gauge depletion, she reaches so much break gauge depletion bonuses that the boss just breaks really fast. Just 2 normal attacks, and then on top of that she got hit, which means she got bonus MP. I have Kirika on the team for bonus MP. She has an MP % portrait as well, and together with the portrait, with Kirika's passive MP regen, and with the fact that she got hit, and all of that together, she actually reaches enough MP in 2 attacks from Mabayu to immediately use a special. That's kind of busted. And then I immediately give her cutaway again. I don't need to worry about the action order. I know I can just always give her cutaway, and then whenever her next turn arrives, the boss gets broken. It's extremely fast. This is some of the fastest breaking you're ever going to see in this game, is Mabayu just giving cutaway to breakers twice in a row. Done. Boss broken. Awesome. And this means that the rest of the team, however, needs to use a lot of normal attacks. And you'll see me, my Kirika doesn't actually ever use her skill once in this entire fight because I don't have the skill points for it. I literally can't. I have her at A2, which gives her a passive barrier at the start of the fight. And that's how I'm getting her to actually have a barrier and give the MP bonuses. Because that's the only way I'm going to be able to actually get Kirika's barrier, because I don't have skill points. I literally can't use the skill ever. That's the downside that's happening here. Then I also need to make sure that my mummy doesn't use skills too often. So she uses skills like once or twice maybe to make sure that the actual buffs are happening. But apart from that, she also has to use normal attack quite often. And then once the break happens, my Madoka has to use normal attack quite often to make sure I have the SP. But then, once the break happens, my Mabayu can give cutaway to my attacker, in this case it's Homura, and my Homura does an absolutely insanely high amount of damage to the boss and absolutely chunks the boss. Now there's some special interactions specifically with Homura that no other attacker really has to worry about, and that is the fact that when Homura uses her special, she action advances her next action by 100%. However, let's say you are on a turn where you have cutaway on Homura. So you have Homura with cutaway, she uses her attack, and then she immediately uses a special before her turn ends. So now her special advances her next turn by 100%, and then as soon as the special is over, since her turn has just ended, cutaway triggers and gives her another 100% action advance, but she just got 100% action advance. She just got 200% action advances for the same turn, which means one of those was wasted. So you can waste an action advance if you use Homura's special on the turn that she has cutaway on. So you need to make sure, even if you have special ready, to actually let cutaway trigger first, actually let yourself get the bonus turn first, and only after that use Homura's special so that you can gain a grand total of 3 turns, which is an insane amount. Because if you do it earlier, you only get 2 turns. Or you can do something else where you simply use her special long before all of this, where Mabayu has given Homura cutaway, and then immediately use Homura special at that point. So then your next turn gets action advanced, and then that's the turn you have cutaway on, so you then use turn, get cutaway, turn, and then you're probably going to be very close to your next special after that. So that's one other way of doing that, but you need to be very careful to not accidentally override your cutaway with Homura's special action advance. So you need to make sure the sequencing is alright. But like I said, only Homura has to worry about that, so keep all of that in mind. So that's it for how you specifically play her in battle, like lots of normal attacks on other characters, and you first give cutaway to your breakers and then give it to your attacker. Awesome. Another thing too that you can potentially do is, let's say for example, you are fighting a boss that gives a lot of ailments, and you need to get rid of all those ailments. There are some bosses that spam a lot of ailments on everyone. And a healer like Kaede and Yuma can only get rid of ailments from 3 characters at once. Well, what if you give cutaway to your Kaede or your Yuma, and then they can use their normal skill twice and actually cleanse the entire party while at the same time healing the entire party and getting a lot of MP to maybe use their special. So you can also use it on a healer to give a healer a lot of ailment cleanse and a lot of healing, and you can basically use the cutaway with basically anyone you want at any point. The only one who you maybe can't use it with is defenders, because a defender who you give cutaway to, like, what are they going to do? They can do normal attack into barrier, but using barrier twice, like, how are you going to use barrier twice? That doesn't do anything, right? It doesn't stack on top of itself, so that's kind of a waste. But apart from that, you can basically give it to any character and it's going to be fine. You can also, of course, give it to someone, and if you don't have the skill points to use 2 skills, they can still just do normal attack and then skill, or skill and then normal attack. Like, you can do it that way. It's kind of a waste. Like, it's kind of a big waste, but theoretically you can do it to just have one of them be a normal attack. But yeah, that's a big waste. Now, that's something that I also need to worry about. Is I'm also going to put it on screen, very different scenarios with auto battle. So when auto battle is active, which is also the case in PvP, of course, you need to worry about who is actually getting targeted by Mabayu's cutaway in auto battle. Because there's a special AI behind this that figures out who to give cutaway to. And the AI is actually extremely simple. It is give cutaway to the attacker with the highest base attack. So let's say, for example, you only have one attacker. That attacker is always getting cut out on auto battle, which means that it's not going to give it to the breaker. That kind of sucks. Secondly, if you have 2 attackers in the team or multiple attackers in the team, it's going to give it to whoever has the highest base attack. I'll talk about that in a second. Next up, let's say you don't have an attacker in the team at all. Then it's going to give it to whoever just has the highest base attack. Okay? Keep all of that in mind. Now, what do I mean with base attack? Let me actually go back to away from the recording and back to me currently as I'm in the game right now. So, how do you actually figure out what base attack is? So if you're in battle, you can look at your screen right here where you show your character's stats or whatever, and it will show your attack as a white number, and next to that it will have a blue number. The blue number is not part of base attack, that is bonus attack. Okay, you have base attack and then bonus attack. Bonus attack doesn't matter, but the white number right here, written in white, the 1904, that's base attack. Now, how do you raise someone's base attack? Well, first off, level a character. If you level a character to level 100, they get more attack. Okay. If you give someone magic level, yeah, that raises someone's base attack. Like this number right here gets added to base attack. Awesome. What else is there? When you ascend a character, they get 2% attack, and that attack is base attack. Awesome. If you get hard file levels, some hard file levels give attack, and that's a base attack. So that's another way of getting more base attack. What else is there? Well, every portrait has an attack value with it. And this attack value that it says right here on the portrait, that is base attack. Now, some portraits also give a percentage buff. That is not base attack. This is bonus attack, okay? That's different. We're only worrying about the number up here. That's base attack that it gives you, okay? What else is there? Well, there's also the support Kyoku. So, you know this, when you equip a support Kyoku, you get some of its stats as well. And yep, the stats that you gain from your support Kyoku are shown right here. Now, there's a little bit of a UI faux pas that I'll mention right here. I just mentioned that if you're in battle and you look at the character stats, the number that's on the left, the number written white, is base attack, and the blue number is bonus attack. Well, in this case it's different, because in this case they're both base attack. So you can see right here how much base attack you're getting by having this character acquired. And if you do the maths, you can also look at the party overview, I think. Yeah, I think it shows it right here as well. You can look at all of the characters' stats, and if this is too much maths for you, you can also look at the character stats in here at this button, and it will show you also where the different numbers come from, like your portraits, your support Kyoku, and your hard file. But you can also tell this overview doesn't actually work outside of battle. I think only if you're in battle, does this overview actually work? Because it just shows zeros everywhere. So that kind of sucks. But at least when you're in battle, you can look at all your characters' stats and you can just compare the white attack numbers of everyone, and you'll see who has the highest attack. And whoever has the highest attack is the one who actually gets the cutaway target. That's basically all there is to Mabayu. But what about the verdict? How good is she? Well, I need to tell you about the actual meta of the game. I wasn't quite sure about this with the videos before this, so I kind of danced around a little. But I'm a lot more confident in exactly what the actual meta of this game is. And the actual meta of this game is, well, there's kind of two metas. The first meta is doing just nightmare content, and the second meta is what if about post-nightmare content, like high level tower, like score attack, like chaos mode. All of these different game modes that have you do really powerful bosses that you need to fight. Well, when it comes to just completing nightmare, the actual characters you have are maybe not as important as you might think. There are people who have beat all of nightmare with almost only 4-star characters. Like, that's something that is possible, right? What is a lot more important for beating nightmare is making sure you have high magic levels on characters, making sure everyone is level 100. It's making sure that you level up your special, maybe. It's making sure that you have the correct portraits on every character. It's making sure that you have good support Kyoku that are also leveled, that also have their magic levels so they can give a lot of stats to everyone. It's making sure that for every boss that you go into, you have a team that actually makes sense, and that team is going to be different on a lot of bosses, right? If you only have a single team you're taking with you into every nightmare boss, you're probably doing something wrong. If you're struggling, and you might have to change your team around, you might have to build other characters. But if you know exactly what you're doing, and you know exactly how to build your team, how to raise your characters, you can make it through nightmare, even with characters that other people might call bad, right? For example, in nightmare, against every boss that is weak to light, you can use Oriko. I've been dunking on Oriko this entire time, but against enemies that are weak to light, even a nightmare, yeah, of course you can kill with Oriko. Of course you can do that, right? Kirika is really good defender, but you can still do basically everything in nightmare with just a 4-star Kokoro, but it will have to be a pretty jacked Kokoro, but you can do it. You can do it. So it might get more difficult, of course, with different characters, but it's still always possible. And you can still always just keep raising your characters, building better teams, making sure you're better prepared for each individual fight to get through Nightmare. So if that's the meta for Nightmare, what does that mean for characters like Mabayu or other characters? Is someone like an A2 Mummy actually that important? Is someone like Muamura actually that important? And the answer is not really. Like, how important are these characters? If I can tell you that if you just keep working away at it, you can still make it without these characters. Well, then I guess you don't need these characters, right? Then I guess maybe they're not actually that important for you to roll. Oh my god, I actually tapped out. Oh my god, there we go. But what about the second part of the meta? What about the meta against really powerful high-end bosses, right? So we know that, for example, on paper, characters like Muamura and an A2 Mummy are really, really powerful, right? So when you're getting to really, really powerful bosses like Late Tower, like Chaos Mode, or Chaos Mode is just released and I still haven't beaten a single boss. Does that mean that characters like that are really powerful specifically for Chaos Mode? And this is where the second part of everything comes in, where I need to tell you guys that for Chaos Mode, maybe it isn't that important if a specific character is good on paper. Maybe it's more important what type that character is. So Chaos Mode and score attacks, for example, on really high difficulty, what they will do is they will crank up the bonuses you get, or rather the bonuses the boss gets, for fighting against characters that are of the wrong element. So, for example, if I show you the current like Chaos Mode boss right here that is just released, I can show you this boss, and this boss is weak to the following elements: Forest, Light, and Void. Forest, Light, and Void, okay? So you can see that we have 3 characters that are of the correct element, and we have Felicia, who is not of the correct element, and we have another attacker who is of the wrong element. What can possibly go wrong? Certainly I can overcome this difficult environment that I found myself in, where I don't have the correct characters of the correct element. And you'll see the following happen. Oh no, oh no, oh no, that is not good. You can see that the characters who are of the correct elements are mostly fine, and the characters who are not the right elements, they're in trouble. They are very much in trouble. But maybe that's not a big deal. Maybe we can just deal some damage still, right? Oh no, that's no damage. That is actually no damage. My Madoka deals like 2,400 damage? 2,400 damage to my Madoka? Is Mayacho even alive? No, she can't even damage. Mayacho deals like 1,000 damage per hit. Mayacho deals like 1,000 damage per hit. And my Madoka did like 3,000 or something, or 2,400. If you're off the wrong element, you can't really play these bosses. It's like not possible to play these bosses if you're not off the correct element. It just doesn't work, right? And this is the meta for actual high-end, like really high-end stuff, is you need to have the correct elements. So an actual party for this fight might look like this. You'll see everyone's of the correct element. But what this means is that you need to ask yourself, do you want to be someone who can actually play really high-end content like this? And if you're someone who wants to play this really high-end content, it doesn't matter more so about the actual characters themselves, although that also matters. That's also quite important, but it matters even more that you can put together an entire team that is well-rounded and has all of the capabilities you need of exactly these elements. And once you start thinking like that, you kind of realize, oh, I need to roll for every character. Like double Iroha, I'm gonna need double Iroha for dark type bosses. I'm gonna need Mabayu for light type bosses. I'm gonna need Kaide for forest type bosses. And Mami for forest type bosses. And I'm gonna need Madokami for light type bosses, although maybe Odiko can also do it. I'm gonna need my Madoka for light type bosses. Ooh, I kind of need everything. Because depending on the elements, I need different teams of different elements. And oof. Yeah, I need to roll for everything. So to pull back and put it all together again, if you only care for beating Nightmare, you don't need to roll for anything. Or at least not for characters that you believe are powerful. You can just roll for characters that you like, right? If you only want to beat Nightmare, just roll for characters you like and read some guides, go to Discord, talk to other people, post your teams, people can help you out, right? If you want to do high-end stuff, you need to whale and get every character. And that's it. That's the only two ways you need to approach the gacha. Either roll for who you like or roll for everyone. So me telling you, is this character good or not, doesn't really matter that much. Because I can tell you, oh, for light type enemies, you need to use Mabayu. In high-end content, otherwise you don't. It's like really weird to actually talk about how good a character is. The only thing that maybe in the future might become important is, let's say they release another light type buffer. And then we have two light type buffers. Oh, then it becomes important. Because then we need to actually worry about which of the two is better. For example, we actually have two light type breakers. The other one is Iroha. And in this case, you can say, oh, maybe Iroha is actually bad because Pluvia is a better light type breaker. So Iroha is a terrible character because Pluvia is just better. And that's it. That's basically the only thing that really matters is there someone of the exact same element and role that I'm better as? Then that character is good. So yeah, that's basically it. The only thing I can tell you about is PvP, where Mabayu, like I said, is one of the best characters in the game right now because with correct setups, and you need to make sure that the attack values, the base attack values of everyone line up. She's extremely powerful because she can, for example, give a double turn to your Arena or to your Pluvia Madoka and get immediate breaks to everyone and can do some absolutely crazy stuff that will roll everyone immediately and extremely powerful. But you need to have correct setups with everyone having the correct attack value so that she actually targets the correct target with her skill. And that might be kind of difficult because you need to move support Kyokus around, you need to move your portraits around and kind of worry about how you can actually get those exact values on every character to make sure that the target is correct. But yeah, that was a really long video because there was a lot of stuff to talk about, especially regarding the future of how I'm going to do reviews where there's not that much of a point to talk about how good a character is unless there's another character of the exact same role and element combo. Only then does it actually matter about how good a character really is. So yeah, that was that. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hit subscribe button, ring the bell, and I'll see you guys next time.